Thank you. We are live. This is the Sunset Advisory Commission, and we are looking at sunsetting commissions and boards. So it is November 15th, and we have a slightly thin agenda for today because we had asked, there's a number of boards and commissions, and we had asked Agency of Health, of Human Services to present, and they wrote back and said they just could not. They're so out straight right now that they couldn't do it. So today we'll go, one of the things we'll do is go through. Oh, but we're supposed to have introductions first. So introductions. Brian already did introduce himself to us, but.
All right, I guess I'll start. I'm Representative John Gannon from Wilmington.
I'm Jeanette White, Senator from Wyndham.
Rutland County Senator Brian Caldwell.
I'm Matt Kraus. I'm one of the gubernatorial appointees, and I'm from Stowe.
My name is Rob Leclerc, and I'm state rep representing Barry Town.
And I should just apologize. The other governor's appointee was Sue Zeller in the past, and she retired. And there was a new appointee made, but we did not, we're not advised of that particularly. So we don't know if she even knows about this meeting yet. So John has just sent her an email.
I just emailed her with our location in case she can join us.
Yeah.
But
So-
obviously it's last minute invite.
Yeah, so.
Can we just ask if we can be heard with the masks on so that we're,
Delia said that these mics are really sensitive and they're picking things up. So if anybody is watching, those are the people that would not be able to hear us.
Okay.
And I would assume they would let us know. My experience from other committees is that if people are out there and can't hear, they tell us. So. The mics in room 11, I guess, that are the worst. You have to get your mouth right up to them. So, all right. So should we, Amron, do you want to join us? Remind us of our charge? Yes. Oh, and we should also introduce Amron Aperjali, who is our legal counsel.
Good morning.
Morning.
So today you have some written materials. You have the very large Excel spreadsheet that lists all the boards and commissions. We also have an agenda. I had also made a summary to talk about 2021 legislation that related to boards and commissions that is posted. It is not printed though, so I don't know if you have seen it. So I will. Would you like me to screen share it so you can see it on one of the big screens? Or should I just walk you through? It's not complicated, but I didn't know if you wanted to also read it while you're moving.
Whatever, if you want to start going through it, I guess, and then if we think it's more complicated, then we can ask you to screen share it.
Find it on the committee website.
Yes,
Okay.
it is posted.
Okay.
So to start off, I was just going to do a review of the Sunset Advisory Commission's statutory charges and duties. This commission was created in 2018 during the special session in Act number 2. And it outlines that the Sunset Advisory Commission is established to make recommendations regarding the state's boards and commissions, including their necessity, their powers and duties, and the per diem compensation of their members. The commission comprises 6 members, 2 representatives, 2 senators, and 2 gubernatorial appointees. The commission is to complete its review of the state's boards and commissions by January 4th, 2023. So since it has been a while since this committee has met, I'll just dive in a little bit into the details of Act number 2 from 2018 to refresh your memory on the commission's duties. And just for those who are listening and following along online, when we say state boards and commissions, this term is defined in statute. It means professional or occupational licensing boards or commissions, advisory boards or commissions, appeals boards, promotional boards, interstate boards, supervisory boards and councils, and any other boards or commissions in the state. So it covers a lot. And in terms of powers and duties, so first, the commission shall inventory all of the state boards and commissions, organize them into groups, which you will see is done within this spreadsheet that you've been using for the last few years, and then establish a schedule each session to conduct a review within the biennium. So also the commission will provide its inventory of the state boards and commissions to the Secretary of State, as the Secretary of State is required to maintain an inventory of state boards and commissions. So in its review of each state board and commission, the commission shall consider, one, the purpose of the board or commission and whether that purpose is still needed, how well the board or commission performs in executing that purpose, and if the purpose is still needed, whether state government would be more effective and efficient if the purpose were executed in a different manner. Each board and commission shall have the burden of justifying its continued operation. And for any board or commission that the commission determines should continue to operate, the commission shall also determine whether members of that board or commission should be entitled to receive per diem compensation, and if so, the amount of that compensation. There is a report requirement on or before the end of the biennium during which it reviews a group. The commission shall submit to the House and Senate committees on government operations its findings, any recommendation to eliminate a state board or commission within that group, or to revise the powers and duties of board or commission within the group, its recommendations regarding board or commission member per diem compensation, and any other recommendations for legislative action. The commission shall specifically recommend whether there should be changes to the information the Secretary of State provides in his or her inventory of the state boards and commissions. And that is those are the most pertinent parts, other than to say that the Sunset Advisory Commission is repealed on January 4th, 2023. 2022 will be the last full year of this commission. So that is the overview. I know you have all been on this committee, so it shouldn't be new, but a refresher before you begin your work. So now I will move to legislation from 2021 that affects boards and commissions. So as you know, and this is covered in a bit of my summary, each year the commission has met during adjournment and made some recommendations regarding changes to boards and commissions. Most recently, this commission met last year and made some recommendations that ended up being in H122 for 2021. This bill was signed into law as Act 52 of 2021. There were some changes that occurred during the session. The General Assembly ultimately passed Act 52 with some changes to how H122 was introduced and as SAC recommended. So I will just walk quickly through that so you have some idea of the ultimate results of your recommendations from last year. So the first three sections in H122 concerned the National Forest Lands Board. This commission had recommended that the National Forest Lands Board be repealed. However, following witness testimony in House Government Operations, it was decided that the National Forest Lands Board should not be repealed at this time. So that section from H122.
At some point, can we maybe have an explanation for, I mean, not right now, but as we're going through and changes were made
Sure.
from our recommendations, just why those changes were made?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Sections 2 and 3 were some minor conforming language changes regarding the National Forest Lands statutes. I would not consider them substantive. They were taking out words such as such land, and changing that to land in the state of Vermont, those types of changes. Sections 4 to 6 concerned the Vermont Commission on Women. This committee had recommended that the Women's Commission be moved to a new chapter within Title III. Previously, the commission was established by executive order. and it has existed for some time now. So H 122 would move the Commission on Women into Title III, and then there was some clarifying language around commission appointment requirements. So none of those were changed in Act 52. But I will note that in addition to the changes recommended by this committee following testimony from the Commission on Women, Act 52 also removes the statutory prohibition on commission funds being used for legislative or administrative advocacy. This change was made.
I'm sorry, could you clarify that again? Because
Yes, so there was a provision within the statutes on the Commission on Women that prohibited the commission funds to be used for legislative or administrative advocacy. And the Vermont Commission on Women came in to testify and explained that this did not seem to be a common prohibition for other state boards or commissions, which it was requested that I do some research on that. I also could not find a similar prohibition for any other state board or commission. And the Commission on Women testified that having that prohibition made some contracting for services problematic because of just the nature of the services, and having that prohibition in there made it difficult at times for the commission to complete its work with the third parties that it would like to do business with. So that prohibition was taken out by Act 52. The next three sections, sections 7, 8, and 9 of Act 52, concerned the Toxics Technical Advisory Board, the Champion Land Transaction Citizen Advisory Council, and the Working Group on Conservation Easements. All three of these councils and boards were recommended to be repealed by the Sunset Advisory Commission. And those repeals were in H 122 and those maintained in Act 52. All of those repeals went through as recommended. There was also the repeal and transfer of the duties of the pre-kindergarten to 16 council. This commission recommended that those that council by its name and with those duties be repealed from where it was and be moved, underneath so the council's duties be moved underneath the Vermont Higher Education Endowment Trust Fund Council in Title 16. That recommendation was in H 122 and was also ultimately in Act 52 with no changes. Probably the most substantial change to H 122 and the Sunset Advisory Commission's recommendations was the additions of provisions regarding the State Emergency Response Commission and regional committees. This was not something that the Sunset Advisory Commission had mentioned or included in its recommendation, but this was added within one of the government operations committees. I'm trying to remember whether it came first in the House or the Senate.
What was the commission again?
This is the State Emergency Response Commission.
No, I think it came out of Health and Welfare. Is that the one that has the, it's the wellness?
No.
Oh, no, it's a different one. Okay.
Yeah.
It is a different one. This, I believe, was at the request of the Division of Emergency Management.
It was, yeah.
And so there are a variety of changes within the Division of Emergency Management and the Department of Public Safety.
Oh, right. Erica Bornham was the.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, yes.
Got it. I remember that.
Yes,
Yes.
this will all be new information for this commission, except for those who are on government operations committees. So this added sections 12 to 17 to H 122, and it includes establishing regional emergency management committees to coordinate emergency planning and preparedness activities to improve their region's ability to prepare for, respond to, and recover from all disasters. Increase the number of members on the State Emergency Response Commission from 15 to 17 members. It made some miscellaneous clarifications in the description of the duties of the State Emergency Response Commission, which are generally housekeeping in nature. It made clarifications in the description of the duties of local emergency planning committees and added the requirement that where a local emergency planning committee represents more than one region in the state, The appointed representatives shall be geographically diverse. It repealed the statutory provisions establishing and governing the Radiological Emergency Response Plan Fund and amended the statutory provisions governing the Hazardous Chemical and Substance Emergency Response Fund to specify a total annual grant amount that may be given to local emergency planning committees. And then lastly, it made some conforming language changes to the Emergency Management Division duties consistent with those items that I just listed, and repealed provisions relating to a radiological emergency response plan. So all of the earlier miscellaneous boards and commission changes that I mentioned were effective upon passage of Act 52, which was June 3rd, 2021. And then those last sections regarding Emergency Management Commission and those local committees took effect on July 1st, 2021.
So can I just go back a second for Matt's information? The emergency one sounds very complicated.
Mhm.
But in fact, the bottom line, I believe, was that local emergency boards had responsibility for not only disasters and natural events, but also for hazardous events. And what they essentially did is that the state board is now responsible for hazardous events, and the local boards will be able to concentrate more on their emergency. That really was, do I remember that right? Because it sounded very complicated and they moved a lot of things around, but that was the primary reason.
Yeah, I think I actually ended up presenting that. It was just more streamlining
Mhm.
those responsibilities compared to what they are now.
And taking the hazardous events away from the local, because they didn't really have the resources to do it anyway, and it strengthened their ability to plan for other emergencies. Thank you.
All right, so those are all of the changes from Act 52, 2021. I also have a list of some other legislation that came in outside of the boards and commissions bill. So I will just list those at a high level. The Commission on Public School Employee Health Benefits, Act 7, Section 2. And I should note that in my summary, there are links to all of these acts. So if you have any questions or want to dive in a little bit deeper about these boards or commissions, you can click on the link and go to the section referenced and you'll see a description of what these boards and commissions are. So Act 7, Section 2 modified Title 16, Section 2102F to limit the per diems of the Commission on Public School Employee Health Benefits to 20 meetings per year. Previously, there was no limit. Now there is a limit of 20. There was the Emergency Service Provider Wellness Commission. This is a new commission entirely. I should note that all of these boards and commission changes have been incorporated into the spreadsheet. So you will see them in here, the dates that I'm describing now. State Ethics Commission in Act 44, Section 2. The commission's repeal, which was July 1st, 2021, has been extended to July 1st, 2022. The Vermont Pension Investment Commission, Act 75 of 2021, Section 1, made significant revisions to the commission, which was formerly known as the Vermont Pension Investment Committee. There was also the creation of the Joint Public Pension Oversight Committee, also in Act 75, Section 11, Legislative Committee. Health Equity Advisory Commission, a new commission established by Act 22, Section 3. The Department of Corrections Monitoring Commission, also a new commission established by Act 56 of 2021, Section 2. The Vermont Community Broadband Board, a new board established by Act 71 in Section 2. The Agricultural Innovation Board. This is a new board established by Act 49, 2021, which takes the place of the Pesticide Advisory Council. This legislation repealed the Pesticide Advisory Council as it is and replaced the Agricultural Innovation Board to complete those duties that were previously done by the Pesticide Advisory Council. In addition, Act 49 also took over the functions of a Seed Review Committee, which was also repealed within Act 49 in Section 7. The Advisory Council on Literacy. This is a new council established by Act 28, 2021, Section 5. The Intercollegiate Sexual Harm Prevention Council. This is a new council established by Act 68, 2021, Section 6. The Advisory Council on Wellness and Comprehensive Health, Act 66, 2021, Section 9, makes changes to the qualifications of council members, requires the council to meet at least twice a year, and updates the council's duties. So that council already existed, but there were some changes in Act 66. And then lastly, the Cannabis Control Board Advisory Committee, Act 62, Section 2, amended the membership of the advisory committee. And those are all of the changes from 2021 legislation. You will see them in your spreadsheet if you want to look, and if you want more information, you can click on the enacting legislation in my summary that is posted online.
So did we add more than we repealed last year? Did we create more than we?
I counted at least 8.
Potentially.
Some of them were already existed, like the Cannabis Advisory Board, and we just made changes to it, but I think we added more than.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Thank you. So Ameren, I appreciate the work that you've done on this, and I'm wondering if you can, from a way up high kind of point of view, tell us where we are in the process. This whole thing has to end by, as you put, January of 2023.
Yes.
How far away are we? In other words, how many have we looked at? How many are remaining to be looked at? That kind of thing. And if you don't have a ready answer, I certainly understand that. But
Yeah.
I'd like to get a sense of, are we behind the 8 ball here? Are we ahead of where we wanted to be? What do we have left to do, kind of thing?
That is an excellent question. I do not know. I have not
Okay,
done the math on how far you are through those, but I expect that will be part of the planning for the next week or two. And I'm
Yeah.
happy to assist.
I looked quickly at the spreadsheet, which I find very helpful, and I'm kind of counting in my head, and it looks like we've gotten at least 50% of the work done, but I could be way off. It'd make me really happy if we were 75% of the way to conclusion, but I don't know that. So, okay, thank you.
A related question. I am doing some work on that. I don't know historically how this commission has looked at boards and commissions that were newly created since this commission started. For example, all of the ones that were added this year. I should say all of them. So it looks like approximately 7 were added this year. And I don't know how that has factored into this commission's review and how, so just something for you to think about as I am assisting you with this.
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer either.
I don't know that we have, but do we? My understanding is, and I think I'm right here, that as with reports, they sunset after 5 years.
Well, I was just gonna ask that question. Was that wishful thinking on our part, or I thought, because I was looking at the ones here and I don't see any sunset date.
So that is something we discussed in preparing for this meeting and that's under process for creating boards and commissions.
Okay.
Is, should we make recommendations to the legislature about things that should be in any bill that creates a board or commission, such as a sunset provision? Because I think there are some boards and commissions that were created last session that don't have a sunset provision.
Yeah, so we'll put that conversation off until we get there.
Yeah, because I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay,
that's an
Yeah.
important discussion.
I have one comment and one question. So the comment is, I'm a little concerned that we now have more new commissions than we've deleted in the past legislation. It's up to the legislature to act however it sees fit. but that's not a particularly good sign when we're getting more new ones than we're deleting old and unused or unneeded ones. That's the comment. The question is, the changes that were proposed to some of the existing committees, like the marijuana board, were they reviewed by either the Senate or the House Government Operations Committee so that you could comment upon them before they were proposed?
Oh, they were in legislation, yeah, so they went through committee process.
Okay, and so any of the change, not the new ones, but the changes that were proposed in the existing committees have been reviewed by either the Senate or the House Government Operations.
Or the Committee of Jurisdiction. For example, I think that there was a health and welfare one that made some changes. And those changes were reviewed by the Health and Welfare Committee, not by us.
Right.
So, I mean, I can go through the list of the boards and commissions we looked at in House Gov Ops, because,
You mean in addition to the ones that were
no, the ones on this list that Ameren provided us,
Yeah.
I mean,
the new ones?
yeah.
Yeah.
Many of these, we either were responsible for the bill,
Right,
or touched.
Yeah.
So like State Ethics Commission, that was in both Senate and House Gov Ops.
and that was an existing committee.
That was
Commission
just
that we
extending it.
changed.
That
Yeah,
that
we
was a
did it.
simple, doing what we're supposed to do, sunset review,
Mhm.
and deciding to extend it for another year.
Mhm.
You don't need to go out to every one,
Okay,
John. What my question was, in its totality, of the government operation, the Senate Government Operations Committee and the House Government Operations Committee reviewed the changes that these committees proposed. And I understand what Jeanette's saying. Well, the Senate Health Committee took a look at this and recommended the changes, but the Sunset Advisory Commission, we're the ones who have the final say whether those changes are going to be acceptable or not.
No, the legislature has the final say. We make a recommendation.
Right.
But, and I guess we could review all the changes that were made, but, to those,
I just want to make sure that somebody,
they were, for example, the wellness, the emergency management or first responder wellness committee, I don't even remember what that was called. That originated in Senate Health and Welfare. But we reviewed it there in a lot of detail and gave our blessing to Health and Welfare to go forward with it.
Okay.
So, and the addition to the Cannabis Advisory Committee, that was proposed in a piece of legislation that came to, and it was reviewed, I think, both by us and by judiciary. So those changes. So,
thank you.
yes, yeah.
I will say, I mean, government operation touched a lot of these. And there is a informal process for reviewing boards and commissions created by other committees of jurisdiction. Sometimes the chairs are very good about following that process. And I would say sometimes they are not. When you agree, Rob, I mean, some of these we saw, like we worked on the Intercollegiate Sexual Harm Prevention Council, which was not directly in our commission, it was in judiciary.
Yeah.
But we saw that one. But the Advisory Council on Literacy, I don't think we ever saw that in government operations.
I don't remember ever seeing it.
Yeah, so I'm just saying there is an informal process that GovOps does review many boards and commissions. However, it's up to the chair of the Committee of Jurisdiction to make that reach.
And that raises one final question.
Sure.
So as the co-chair of this commission, both of you, are there any that you feel that we should be reviewing, even though a separate committee, either in the House and the Senate, created it? So for example, you just mentioned one, John, that you didn't review, the literacy one, is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so are there any of those that you, as co-chairs, you would say, you know what, maybe we should take a look at that one, or they're not, that's fine, but at least I'd like to ask that question.
I mean, we can talk about that, but my feeling on that, I think, is that if it was just created last year, that there probably isn't much to look at in terms of whether they're performing well and for at least a year or so. I don't know if they've ever even really met yet since they were just created in June. So I don't know. I have I would, when we talk about the process, I think that we can deal with that on an ongoing basis about how we do the process and how, and if there's a sunset, then
Because I am concerned, this is just me. I appreciate that sunsets go in, especially in new commissions, so that we don't end up, another sunset advisory commission 5 years from now is going through the same process. And if they have sunsets in them, I'm comfortable with that. You know, new commission, been established, legislature made the decision, we're not going to review them, but it's got a sunset. And that discussion would take place when the sunset arrives. Okay, that's it. I don't want to chat any more than that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll just, if I could comment on, and I'm very sensitive to what you initially brought up, Matt. I'll use the analogy of quicksand where and I think there were somewhere around 280 boards and commissions when this commission began looking at them and saying, okay, does this one make sense or should we get rid of it? I would hate to think that the net result of every legislative session is an additional board or commission. So that now we're up to 300 instead of trying to kind of find the solution to get rid of some of them. So I'm very sensitive to that. And I feel like sometimes it is a quicksand-like where we try to pull ourselves out and yet here comes some more. But I will tell you that, for instance, the ethics panel one that we looked at, we didn't change the intent or design or function of that. All we did was say, if we don't extend it, the chair of that ethics commission isn't going to get paid next year. And the work that they're trying to do, they're trying to come up with an ethics policy for the whole legislature. We won't be able to do it unless we appropriate a certain amount of money to keep it going. That's all we did. We extended it for another year. So in that sense, there's already a built-in sunset for it. And so while I'm very sensitive to what you're saying, I think for the most part, what we did last year in terms of looking at some of these other things were minor changes that didn't substantially make any difference to, the intent of the original board or commission. That's all.
yeah, I think also that some of them have a natural end, like the pension
Right.
task
Task
force,
force, yeah.
that ends in this January, I believe.
June.
Huh?
June.
Next June?
So we could testify.
Oh, so, yeah, we had to leave it there so that the the board the task force could testify, but.
Right.
Emran?
I just, since you're bringing up this topic, I just wanted to mention that within this spreadsheet, in my summary, I did not include any working group or task force that
Okay,
is due to end by December of this year because
oh, okay,
it was ending anyway.
because they're already, yeah, okay, great, yeah.
Well, this particular group you're referring to is gonna sunset as far as the working group next month with a kind of a handshake and a variety of recommendations, correct?
Well, our work will, but we had to leave it there so that the task force members could testify before the legislature.
Right.
Right,
Right.
yeah,
Working group, you'll be all done next.
yeah. We hope. Yeah, so I actually am less concerned about the number that we have as opposed to just making sure that we have the right ones and that we don't have ones sitting on the books that are just taking up space. I don't know what the right number is. And so I'm less concerned about the number, getting it right, but
I would agree with that. I mean, there's two things. I mean, are they serving a good function? And have they been reviewed? I do think there should be a review process. I think right now, the process is informal and sometimes it's followed, sometimes it's not. And I think it would be, if it's possible, to make that more of a formal process.
Mhm.
Because then I would be comfortable with every board and commission we create has a sunset provision. Then, a need of creating a new sunset advisory commission goes away. Though I will say, boards and committees of jurisdiction are notorious about hanging on to things such as reports, even though they never read them. And, but I don't know if you're ever going to change that mentality in the legislature. I mean, people with more experience than I can talk about that, but I find that frustrating. I mean, you have to keep this report even though no one's reading it. I mean,
Yeah.
Whereas Jeanette's always said, you don't have to have written reports, you can just have oral testimony.
Instead of saying, prepare a report, say report to
The
the
committee.
committee. And then you don't need to, because the information is there. You don't need to make a report. You need to report to the committee of jurisdiction. But so we actually put that in a couple, I can't even think of which bills it was this year, but I think we put that in report to instead of do a report. Do you remember?
I remember a conversation as part of establishing the Department of Corrections Monitoring Commission, which I believe was, I'm not sure it was formally reviewed by Senate Government Operations. But maybe that was out of House Institutions of Corrections, I believe.
Oh,
There was
yes,
a
it did
discussion
come
about
to,
the
it did come.
Yep.
GovOps.
reports and
Yeah.
how long it should last, and there was some discussion about report 2 versus A1. And I believe one was changed to report 2, and another report requirement was left as a report, submitted report.
Yeah, the other advantage I see to both co-chairs' point is oftentimes, I think an agency spends more time putting a report together with the fancy graphs and all that kind of stuff than the actual work, with all due respect. And the second thing is, if you get someone in to testify before a committee, it's the immediate information that you're getting, not something that was generated in a report 6 months ago and which could have substantially changed. So
Yeah.
I do favor the less formal approach of getting feedback from an agency with direct testimony committees. I think that's good.
And we might think about one of the things we talked about in creating boards and commissions is the titles and what we use on them. And we might think more about some things might be better created as a task force or a working group than a board or commission, because then they do have an end date and it's less likely that they will.
So that implies it's a temporary.
Yeah.
Thing already. It's interesting. That's a good point.
But as John pointed out, chairs like to put in have their own input. So, okay. Thank you. Any more questions about the review of the?
Thanks, Emma.
So I think that there are a couple things on here, the inventory, the process for creating boards and commissions, and we should go through the list here and see which ones we think we might want to schedule for our next meeting. And then we didn't put it on here, but I think we need, one of our charges is the whole per diem. issue. And so we need to figure out how we're going to approach that. And
Approach what?
the per diem issue, that's one of the things that we're supposed to be looking at. And I think that it's pretty complicated, and so we should talk about how we're gonna approach it and how we're gonna schedule it, what we need to hear around that. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So where is your pleasure to jump next?
And can I add one thing? I'm sure you've got this on your list. We have 3 meetings scheduled. And I assume somewhere in this meeting, we're going to spend a few minutes to try to decide what the other 2 dates are going to be. Is that the agenda or no?
Make sure that it's on the agenda so that we all understand. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, what do we want to talk about first? The process for creating, we've already started that discussion. Let's jump there first, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because we've kind of already started that conversation about what, if we have any recommendations about the process for creating them and how that would work.
Well, I mean, I think one thing we've sort of, I think, have a consensus around is every board or commission that's created should have a sunset provision.
Agreed.
I mean,
And I think every new board and commission that's created, it should at least be run by the GovOps committees in both houses, because it does have a direct connection to government. And then, whether it's the chair of the committee or whoever comes in to have that conversation about whether it should, 1, be created, and 2, if it's an existing committee, if it should still exist.
The only issue I could see with that, Representative Leclerc, is it might put a lot of pressure on the 2 committees to be constantly, in other words, every bill that's passed, if it goes from that committee to GovOps before it can get to the floor, there might be a lot of additional work in both the House and Senate GovOps committees to take a look at.
That's very fair.
We, in the Senate, and I'm sure it's true in the House, I don't think there's another standing committee that passes more bills than the Government Operations Committee in the Senate. The wall is full of bills. And I would just hate to see all of a sudden there's 30 more of them because we made this rule.
That's an excellent point. However, where do you build in sort of the check and balance? Do you wait until something goes all the way through the process and then it gets,
Well, I'll yield to my chair of government operations. If you feel that it's something we could do without undue extra work.
I don't know how the House operates around this, but like the way we did it with the emergency, the first responders wellness group, we didn't actually take the bill. Health and Welfare was dealing with it.
Right.
And we just spent a little bit of time looking at it and saying, you might think about this when you're talking about governance and this about when you, so we didn't actually take the bill. So it was much less time. I mean, it didn't take as much time. And we did the same thing a number of years ago when they set up the first, what are those communication union districts, when they set up the one in the EV, what was it called? EC Fiber. The one in Central Vermont. Finance had it, and they just asked us to take a look at the governance. So we didn't actually take the bill. And I think that some of them may be so fast looking at that, I think that
that was my
take the bill. It's,
intent.
yeah.
If the committee doesn't take control of the bill, but you go through it, ask those questions about, does it have a sunset date in it, about the structure, a few other administrative types, and then you're done.
Okay.
And we're supposed to be doing the same thing with exemptions to public records. Is supposed to be being looked at to make sure that by GovOps.
Those do get looked at.
Yeah,
I think,
well, I think because we've established a process for it, so ledge council people know now kind of, and chairs know that they should do that. And the same thing will happen here, I think, but it'll take a while, but
So I'm comfortable with putting sunsets in. I believe in a general sense that is good government. And my question would be, do we need as a commission, if we officially voted on that the commission, the Sunset Advisory Commission felt, 5-0, that there should be sunsets, does that strengthen your ability to ask for those, or does it not make a difference? Or how would you folks, all four of you folks are in the legislature, would it be an advantage to you to be able to say, the Sunset Advisory Commission has looked at this, took a quick vote, or not a quick vote, a vote, and 5-0 says they recommend it.
well, I think it would be in the piece of legislation that's proposed.
Right, I understand that. Oh, I see, you're saying,
This committee is gonna, I would assume, as we have in the past, prepare a bill
Right.
that will start on either side, and that will list the ones that we think we should repeal or make changes to. And it will also address, if we come up with any decisions around the process, that'll be in the bill. If we come up with any decisions around per diems or anything else, that'll all be in the bill.
okay,
So it'll be before the committees.
So in line with Matt's query, are we going to, do we think, say it's 3 years, is it 4 years, is it 5 years? Is it all the same, or can a particular standing committee recommend a board or commission that deviates to some degree from whatever we consider as a standard amount of time? And I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's important to think about it. There's advantages to saying everything's 5 years, and there's disadvantages, because after the first year, we may not need the other one, and yet, here we go, it's gonna go for 4 more years.
so, I mean, I wouldn't want it to be too short because, as you know, it sometimes takes a while to stand up a board or commission. And so like if you had it as only 1 year, I mean, it may have been barely stood up. And so the committee of jurisdiction may not have a lot of information to go on about whether it's achieving its goals or not. If you have it too frequently, I think what will happen, as it happens with the review of reports by chairs, is people will just quickly look at it and say, okay.
I would think that you need to take each one sort of individually, because depending on, like, say, the cannabis control, it's taking a while to stand that whole thing up, get it up towards functional, doing what it's got to do. Plus, if you have a set date for everything, like what John had said, then all of a sudden you just get a mass amount of information, and all of a sudden you're just rubber stamping rather than doing the right thing. So I would say, for me personally, it's each one individually, because some only need to exist for maybe a year. Some are going to be permanent, but yet I think everyone should have a sunset date so that we go back, it goes back and gets revisited.
I kind of disagree with that. I would make everything 5 years, because the 5 years is not, they're not all gonna come up at the same time. So last year, some were created, and then that 5 years will be 5 years from then. And then this year, some will be created, and it'll be 5 years. So they're not all gonna come up at the same time. They're all gonna come up 5 years from whenever they were created. Not every 5 years you review every commission. And I think that ones that only are designed to be there for a year or 2 years should be not considered boards and commissions. They should be considered working groups or task forces with a definite end date. And I think that's up to that's how the pension task force is set up. And the wellness, Ameren, do you remember how that's set up? health equity, whatever that is.
Ugh.
I can't even, it's got such a long title, I can't,
Has more members than it.
I mean, it has about 45 members.
I know.
No, that was an exaggeration.
If you,
Not much.
if you do the 5 years, just, I'm trying to follow this through. Let's just say that 5 years is the sunset. Then the committee of jurisdiction has the opportunity to say, we think we should review it earlier than that. We should do it
Sure.
in 4 years or 3 years. And then I think that gives a little flexibility, adds a little opportunity for flexibility that you're interested in. If the,
Well-
committee, go ahead.
No, I didn't cut you off, Matt. Go ahead. Finish
Well,
your thought.
if the committee of jurisdiction looks at 5 years and says, "Oh, we don't want to do that, we don't need to do that, we want it more, we want a 3-year sunset, then I think that might answer some of the flexibility questions
Yeah.
that you.
Um, I somewhat agree with Madam Chair's logic here. As long as we're clear that we're gonna head down, that we're looking, not everything's a board or commission, that there are truly things that are gonna be considered task force.
Yeah.
And by definition are considered temporary. And that makes some sense to me, but that does seem a bit of a shift that we're gonna have to make and make sure that people understand the difference between the two.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the way we do it with reports. They all have a 5-year sunset. So when you ask for a report at the end of 5 years, it's going to be sunsetted unless you renew it. And so every year, there's some that expire and some that don't. And so if the health equity committee didn't have an end date on it, if it was set up as a commission, then in 5 years, it would have to be reviewed. And-
The Commission on Public School Employee Health Benefits?
No, the Health Equity Advisory Commission,
I don't know.
which came out of
anything.
healthcare, and
Oh, there we go, sorry. Number 6.
actually, it does not have a sunset. I was very unhappy with the way that was set up. I informally reviewed it. Most of my recommendations were not taken.
So setting up this process to really make sure that it gets reviewed, we didn't review it at all. We reviewed the emergency wellness, the emergency workers wellness. And that does not have a sunset because
I'm not so concerned about the time frame as I would be the process that is used to establish and develop that time frame.
well, one of the reasons I support just either every 3 years or every 5 years, I mean, at the end of that time, it be sunsetted is because knowing chairs, they will always set it out as far as they can. If it's set up as a board or a commission. And so if we say it's going to be 5 years, you can't say it's going to be 7. You can't, and why would you say it's going to be 3? If you want it to be end in 2 years, set it up as a task force. And put an end date on it, like we did the pension task force. Anyway, I don't know how other people feel about that, but that makes sense to me because then it's really consistent. And when GovOps reviews them, we would just say, is there a sunset here? Yes, it's sunset in 5 years. And we don't have to get into why did you put 2 years or why did you put 3 years? Everything is 5. So it would make it easier, I think, for the committee.
Yeah, the other The other thing, and I would that a committee would say, you know, we don't need that anymore in advance of the 5th year. But I liken that to tax, which it's never going to go away, okay? It just never is going to get repealed if you allow that to happen. But the other advantage to the 5 versus the 3 is it would span over 2 bienniums. And so you'd have, in a perfect world, at least new eyes looking at a board or commission each time.
Oh,
I see an advantage to that. I mean, 5 years sounds like a long time, but we've already been here, most of us, longer than that. And when you look back, it seems like, for me, 2014 is like a year ago, and yet it's not.
It isn't?
No. So I'm leaning more toward the 5. I wish it were more efficient and more expedient to say 3, but I don't know that that would work for the most part.
and remember, many of these people are on these boards and commissions are somewhat volunteers. And
True.
getting them to, sometimes it takes a year to get going, and then it takes, yeah. Anyway. But I do think we should recommend that there be a sunset provision on every board and
Yep,
commission.
We'll agree on that, right?
And that
Yes.
they be reviewed by GovOps.
Yes. Okay.
And we can just say reviewed, not that they have to take the bill itself. And it could be reviewed by both GovOps committees, because if you made recommendations for that committee, we didn't hear anything about that. So if it had to be reviewed by both of us, it would, our Health and Welfare Committee may have,
Yeah, and
Made some
it's a pretty
changes,
easy checklist of what you
Yeah.
review. I mean, it's like, does it have a sunset provision? How many members does it have? I mean, one of the problems that I found problematic about the Health Equity Commission is it has an unknown number of members.
what
It
do you mean an
has,
unknown?
because the commission can appoint at-large members at its own choosing.
Ooh.
So it has like 26 official members, and then the language says it can appoint more members if it chooses to.
Oh, okay,
So, I mean,
yeah,
first of all, it's a very large commission to start with, and it could get larger. And I mean, that's the whole thing is, it because, at some point, a commissioner or a board becomes unwieldy because there's too many members, it's too hard to meet. Or, you don't have like a quorum, your quorum's like a third of the members. Well, that's not very helpful. I mean, if you're trying to educate people and get a work product at the end of the day. And there were issues like that with the Health Equity
Oh,
Commission.
I didn't realize, I didn't pay
either.
any attention at all.
Maybe we can, as we go through the list, if that one's on there, then you might feel comfortable at least asking them to come in and chat about those kinds of concerns, even though it's a new commission. But you didn't get a full bite of the apple during the legislative session but now the Sunset Advisory Commission thinks, well, maybe there's some validity to that concern, how large they are. I'm just trying to give you the opportunity, give you and us the opportunity to take another look at this and say, 26 members, that's a lot of people. In fact, I don't think I don't know if we've chatted with another commission or committee that had 26 people. Maybe we did, but that's a mob.
I don't think we have taken one up that has that many members. I think there is one that's on our list that has a lot of members.
So we might look at that. I would suggest that we look at it next summer, because I think they've just gotten themselves pulled together.
Yep.
And I think that they wouldn't have anything to even report yet, but it might be something that next summer, fall, that we should be looking at and say, how is it working with 26 members and the other members that you've appointed. So I think that makes sense. Yeah, Rob?
Can anybody tell me what your impression is? Like, I'm looking at all those and I'm seeing a lot of commissions. And then I'm seeing some committees. Then boards. Is there a definition of like what a commission
We,
be theoretically just advisory?
we talked about that in our first year.
We did.
And we actually had a debate where we did not come to any agreement as to how to name boards and commissions. But we did discuss that our first year.
Yeah.
And I think we just concluded that. I mean, we could set up something, I mean, I do think there's a distinction between boards and commissions that are set up to like probably exist for a long time. I mean, the Cannabis Control Commission being an example of something I don't think that's gonna go away anytime soon. Or the State Ethics Commission versus something that's set up to do a single report. Or like the Pension Task Force, which is set up to do, single report with recommendations. I mean, I do think it would be good to create that dichotomy of what's sort of set up for a long time versus what's gonna only be around for report, because many of the, not many of them, but some of the boards and commissions we sunsetted, actually, their only function was to deliver a report, but the bill that created them did not sunset the board or commission.
Yeah.
Right. And that was a mistake.
So Tanya had given us, and these are the notes, I just ran down to the committee room and grabbed them, and I don't know, they're not by year yet, but I'm gonna go through them. She had given us a kind of a definition of boards, commissions, committees, and we might want to think about that, and it doesn't mean that if a chair decides to name something the way they want it, but there should be a difference if what kind of responsibility do they have? What authority do they have? If it's for example, I think it's the Medicaid Review Board. That's a board that has some teeth, and they really are a board, and they make decisions.
That are binding.
Huh?
That are binding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there are commissions, and I think that of commissions is not necessarily making those kinds of binding decisions and have that authority. So we might want to just create something that people can think about when they're creating them, and when they're reviewed by the GovOps committees. Maybe we look at that and say, we know that you want to create this, but do you really want to call it a board or a commission or a committee or a task force? I mean, what?
And I'm thinking that would help people make a decision as to whether they want to be a part of this particular board or commission or whatever committee. Because if you know, getting on something that definitely I'm going to be making some recommendations are going to have some impact versus I'm just going to be sitting back and listening and, you know, we're just going to be totally advisory. That may have a little influence on which way I go, whether I participate or not potentially. I just think it's a good idea to help differentiate exactly what those are. And then that might have some impact on whether we do the 3-year, the 5-year. Let's just say a commission, definitely a task force. You know, the expectation is that it's going to be shorter term in duration and probably automatically be expected to have a sunset.
Yeah, we could ask Tanya for that.
Yeah.
Because I know that she gave us,
Yeah, I remember.
and I'm sure it's in there somewhere.
Well,
But
So I'm a person who sort of watches the clock a little bit. So we've been here an hour and 15 minutes. I wondered if we should finish up this discussion with regard to sunsets and put a stamp on it and move forward, or set it aside until we've decided about definitions. I hate to have the discussion and then walk away from it.
I mean, I think we've made some progress on what a sunset is, and I think there, you know, I think we have to give committees two options. One is a sunset and one's a repeal. Which, like, for example, the Advisory Council on Literacy, it's set up for 3 years, and then it's repealed. I mean, they actually did a good job in this piece of this bill.
Good.
You know, it's supposed to report for the next 3 years, and then it's repealed. Boom.
Well,
And that's what we want to see, either a sunset provision or a repeal provision. For every advisory council, board, or commission that's set up.
and the chairs would kind of work on that. They can either set up a repeal at some point, or it's gonna be sunsetted after 5 years.
Right.
So you can make it earlier than that by putting the repeal in
Yeah.
there. But if you don't, it's gonna go away in 5 years unless you readdress it.
It works for me. Does
What's that?
that work good for you?
Yes, I want
That
a
works for me.
I'm fine
more
with it.
definitive description from us. I think it's, I've used this term, good government, but I think it is good government. So I'm in favor of that.
Okay, and we can just recommend some definitions. They're gonna name it whatever they want, but sometimes just some guidance is
Yeah.
helpful to
Yeah.
people because,
So
Okay.
I guess my question to Ameren is, can we do that? I mean, can the legislature tell other committees to sunset or repeal boards or commissions?
I
Chair?
am trying to envision how that would work. I think you would be talking about putting something in state law that says, that applies to the legislature, that if you create something, you will need to put in a sunset provision. But I believe you could, then the entity
Do we not list
would
that?
just say notwithstanding,
right,
we're not gonna have a sunset provision. So I don't know that it would get you very far.
well, I think we're mainly, aren't we concerned about legislatively created? Ones, those we can definitely say how will sunset after 5 years. I don't think we want to say that the UVM Board of Trustees is going to sunset after 5 years.
Right.
But those that are within our legislative control, I think we absolutely can.
Well, you have right now you have the requirement that reports have that end date, but you also I've seen in reviewing the legislation for this, a lot of these have report requirements, and I've seen, this report requirement will not be subject to that restriction.
Yeah.
So
I know, because chairs like to,
So it is legislatively mandated that reports be reviewed.
yes,
yeah, they all sunset after 5 years.
Okay.
some have been opted out of that.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I know there's a process. I just didn't know if it's legislatively. mandated.
Yep, it's in
This is
the,
why it gets followed.
well, they will get
Okay.
repealed, my guess is unless that's why that thing goes around every year,
So we can create a process to have GovOps review our boards and commissions.
that are legislatively
Legislatively
created.
You mean, you can recommend that legislation be enacted that has that requirement? Yes.
Okay. Just double check it.
Okay. Okay, so we're gonna recommend that that all boards, commissions, legislative created, have a 5-year sunset unless there's a built-in repeal. And that they all be reviewed by GovOps. And that we'll have some definitions for guidance, which may not be in the legislation, but that
Yeah.
makes sense? Okay. All right,
And well, I am concerned that it will take GovOps time to do this. I mean, we could do what we've done with charters and create a subcommittee that sort of takes the lead on reviewing these things. Because if you have the same people looking at them that have some expertise in dealing with boards and commissions, you can take some of the burden off the entire committee to do it.
You are our subcommittee.
Uh,
It's a little harder to create a subcommittee when you only have 5 members, but
No, but it's worked pretty well with charters.
yeah. And if you, yeah, we can manage. We'll figure it out. And if it's too burdensome, we can figure that out too.
Well, but I think that you're only gonna have some basic things that you're gonna be looking at anyway.
Right.
So I don't see it being.
Yeah.
Huge lift, but maybe.
Yeah, I think that, there's just a couple things that we'd be looking at.
Oh, can I?
Yes.
I wanted to add on to my comments in response to Commissioner Gannon.
Speak up a little bit.
Yes, I'm sorry. I know I'm a little far away. So because you're talking about something that's strictly legislative process, I don't know that that's an option that you would want necessarily going through legislation for a bill that would go to the governor for signature if you're purely talking about how the legislative process is operating. And maybe this would be something that you would want to discuss with the House clerk and the Senate secretary about whether this could be done through rule, because that may be a more appropriate avenue for this type of requirement.
That's a good, yeah. I think that's the way we did it with reports. No, that's in legislation.
That is in legislation.
Yeah.
It is, wow.
It is.
It is.
We put that in there when Otto was still.
But that's interesting, that's in legislation, because that's really just a legislative issue about whether the legislature itself reviews the reports.
That, we put it in there.
But we should, I
Years
think
ago.
you're right, Amber, we should check with the clerks.
Okay, all right, but this is gonna be our recommendation, whether it's by rule or by legislation, right? Okay, we got that. Thank you. Where do you want to jump next? Co-chair
Um,
or committee?
Could we take a brief
yeah,
recess?
Huh,
Yeah, there's a horse that needs attention.
okay,
wow.
all right, okay.
Uh-oh, that's not good.